Welcome to the Essential Libertarians. I am your host, Kareem, with my amazing co-host, Daniel Betro, and special guests, Scott Bob Dorr and Aubrey. How's everybody doing?
I'm good.
Fantabulous.
I like Aubrey's plant, and I like Scott's hat.
My very real plant. It's completely real.
It's real.
Yeah. I just got a hell of a garage with a lot of things going on.
It's Texas. Have fun, man. Free state.
That's right, man.
Just get rid of your boy, Dan Crenshaw. I didn't say that live.
No.
If you want to keep the Ron Paul movement going, and if you want to keep the ideals of Murray Rothbard alive, head to the lpmisescaucus.com. Here you can enter your name, last name, email address, and phone number, and become part of the decentralized revolution. Our message is simple. No more wars. As you saw Dave Smith talk to Rogan about Yemen. If you don't know what Yemen is, I would say take 10, 20 minutes out of your time, find out. No more lockdowns, no more bailouts, no more mandates. It's quite simple, lpmises.com. If you have any questions, you can click on resources in our actions and learn more about it. So the first story I have is actually pretty interesting. At We Are Change, the doctor who discovered the variant, the third variant for the scary beer flu, was pressured not to reveal it's mild. And I believe she's South African, but that goes besides the point. When she found this strain, Angelina Cotis, I believe that's how you say her name, said she was pressured by European governments not to reveal that it had a mild presentation, according to an interview in Germany. When asked if it was true, Cotis replied, "I was told not to state publicly that it was a mild illness. I've been asked to refrain from making such a statement and say that it's a serious illness. I declined. What does that mean? I'm a clinician and I'm based on the clinical picture. There are no indications that we are dealing with a very serious disease. The course is mostly mild. I'm not saying you won't get sick if you're mild, but the definition of mild is clear. There actually is a World Health Organization. Patients can be treated at home, and oxygen or hospitalization is not required," which I think a lot of hospitals would be upset because, we want to admit people. If they have it, they get a financial thing. That's not working anymore.
And we covered that, right? Me and you covered that they get like something like 10 to 15,000 for if they go on a ventilator, and even more if they die. And that's a legitimate thing, that hospitals do get financial incentives for not only people dying, but for people who get COVID cases, for people who go on the ventilators, who go in the critical care units, and for them when they die. So you have to be a fool to think that plays no part in the sort of hospital's policy and maybe getting more people. I'm not saying necessarily doing it like out of an evil way, but maybe get more people in there, have more people die. I don't know. Like you'd have to be dumb to assume that they're just going to play fair when they have these thousands of dollars that are being, given to them for deaths and infections.
Yeah. Well, hey, I don't look at people. A lot of people look at politics and stuff like good and evil, like bad guys and good guys.
Yeah.
And there is some in the world. I can point to some cases just saying this person just a bad person. But 9 times out of 10, I find it's not like the comic book or the movie structure where there's an evil guy saying, "Ha, I want to rule the world." It's just coming down to, hey, there's incentives to do bad things, so I'll do bad things. There's incentive to do good. I'll generally do good. Are they always going to do that? Will always be the case? No. But it does regulate behavior to a huge extent and help externalities. So just to finish this,
they don't even have to do very much because it's thousands of dollars to go into an ER. So my husband works there, and people will get tested for COVID.
Yeah.
They'll be asymptomatic and they walk into the ER. Really? They get charged. Yeah. And he says, "Well, go ahead and go home and eat some chicken soup." He's not going to try to get him in there, but somebody is profiting from the fact somebody just made $3,000 from a completely healthy person walking in there and handing them their COVID test. So it would be completely foolish to think that somebody isn't very happy that's happening.
So that's funny you say that, Aubrey, because when I had COVID twice, I had COVID and I went into the hospital, right? So I get admitted, I go in there, go to the ER and stuff like that. and I wait 2 hours in the hospital because it is flooded with people. This is like the Omicron, right? When this was big, this wasn't beforehand. But there's so many people in the waiting room. And once I got there, I realized a lot of the people there were for COVID. So then it got me thinking, right? So there's the majority of people there were not deathly ill. There was not a lot of people who were coughing severely. A lot of people who looked in better shape than me who were there. And I started to say, so all these people who go and get admitted into this ER, they are counted technically as a hospitalization. I said, is that true? And then I started looking at the numbers, like, it is true. You literally could have no symptoms whatsoever, test positive, go in there, and you don't even have to test positive, because I never even tested positive and I got counted as a COVID case because I had symptoms. So like but forget that. Like, if you test positive, you don't have to have anything wrong with you, and that's considered a hospitalization. So when they're looking at these hospitalizations and trying to use them as like a metric to keep lockdowns, keep things on, you have to understand what percentage of that is people who are hospitalized, who are really, really sick, and what percentage of that is the average person going in there who maybe doesn't have the best insurance and is just going to the ER and isn't that bad, you know?
Or has a broken leg, because they finally did come out and admit publicly that if you are hospitalized with COVID, if you have a broken leg and you test positive for COVID, they finally publicly admitted that, yes, you are counted as a COVID hospitalization, which is absurd.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I liked when they asked the CDC director who had it with and for. But the big thing, I think, is this. What she said at one point, South Africa wasn't a big deal, and she said she wasn't pressured by South African authorities. Is that because South African authorities are somehow enlightened folks? I wouldn't say so. You know, they still have a lot of problems there with different, political instability, and that country has a lot of issues. But they're probably not getting a financial incentive, so they don't care. And she also said her reports threw them off track, and you also have to look what's happening at a grassroots level. General practitioners who treat the sick every day must be asked what they experience and have the clinical picture itself. So that's pretty much it for that article. It's just interesting to see that the person who actually came up with the thing came out and said, hey, here's what's going on. Because a lot of people, especially after, in my opinion, Snowden, Albrecht, Assange, Daniel Hale, the drone guy, when you come out and you're like, hey, this narrative doesn't make any sense, and here's everything behind it. Generally, the track record isn't very good.
Wow, I just realized something. My audio wasn't on this whole time for my recording.
Oh, no.
I'll restart. It's all good. Good thing it was in the beginning. Start fresh. Anyways, continue.
All right, so that was what I had to. Did you want to add anything to that, Scott?
All I was going to say is it's funny because I remember watching Rogan Live actually with Elon Musk saying the same thing about the numbers, and I had the same feeling because, I mean, that's what I kind of live by is good, analysis and experiments and numbers and things like that. And I just thought, this is a terrible, piss poor job of accounting for any of this, including did you die with COVID or because of COVID and all that other kind of stuff. And then as far as the hospital
Jake
pressure,
Tapper had to admit this. I don't know if you guys saw, but Jake Tapper on CNN yesterday or 2 days ago questioned the narrative that they've been saying, oh, you're questioning the narrative. But he did the same thing. He simply asked, is it like what percentage of this 40% of people hospitalized are going in there with a broken leg? And then he made the critique of the sort of the numbers, and he's like, by this time we should get things right. It's like, Jake Tapper, you're like 2 years late, but whatever, but still the point is like, it's one thing I've realized about the news cycle, about information in general, is that information comes out, right? And it usually takes 6 months to a year, especially if it's really high level information that's really damaging to the establishment. It takes 6 months to a year for that information to be printed and accepted as fact in the mainstream. It will happen, right? But it takes 6 to 12 months, maybe longer, depending on the profoundness and the damages that could cause certain Democratic politicians, right? Think about what happened with Cuomo, right? Think about what happened to Andrew Cuomo. We knew about the hospitals, and we knew about the nursing homes, and we knew about We didn't know necessarily about the sex affairs. There were rumors, but we knew that there was thousands of people who didn't need to die because he put sick people in nursing homes when his own medical advisors advised him against this 7 months before it was even covered in the news. So what you're hearing today will probably be printed in the mainstream and accepted as fact 6 months from now. So just remember, like, what's conspiracy now, what's fringe now will be probably mainstream later.
Well, the midterms are coming up. In time for the midterms, everybody will be made happier.
Yeah, I think your best news source is Babylon Bee, guys. I mean, like the Babylon Bee, it's supposed to be satire, but it's about 6 months in advance, at least. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it turns out to be exactly spot on, correct. I mean, it's called.
I have a satire site. I have a satire site.
Oh, you do? That's awesome. What is it?
Oh, it's called fakenewsyourway.com. It's very small. It's to help me vent so I don't say things I shouldn't say in public.
Dude, what is it?
I'm going to do one called Slopes.
Fakenews.com. What is it?
Fakenewsyourway.com.
Fake News Your Way. I'm saving it. Fake News Your Way.
I'm going to do Polita-ass, and it's going to be like a fact-checking site. But it's going to be like a sort of a gag, something like that, or slopes, like like I almost said Bumblebee, Babylon Bee. But yeah, it's hilarious how they actually do make fun of stuff, and they do meme and they do satirical stuff, and then that stuff comes true, and it's like, what the hell? Or like we're living in a simulation. I don't know who's controlling it, but I said this on Facebook. I was like, whoever's running the show or whoever the individuals are who are controlling this simulation, who are behind the wheel, who are the puppet masters, they are very sick and twisted and have a dark sense of humor.
You know who it is? It's Matt Groening.
They have.
Now. Yes. Matt Groening.
Yes, it is.
Matt Groening probably runs the Bee. He's been doing the sim. You know what I mean? He's just seen it all. He's going back.
That'd be hilarious. The Babylon Bee has like a bunch of fucking people in there from like 50 years from now.
Yeah. That's funny. I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, but I think it's right.
Anyway.
So, well, Daniel, I was just gonna suggest to people they're definitely running the simulation, but I'm not gonna go into it. But how do you know they're people? It's just something to.
Yeah, I get where you're going with this. I don't succumb, and I don't believe in the whole lizard reptilian theory. So.
No. Well, let me ask you something. Do you believe in the? I'm not going on the lizard reptilian thing. I'm curious if you believe it. So, all right. I just got to preface it. Like one of my favorite classes was vector calculus, and there's all this math that goes into further dimensional realities and things.
Yes.
And we can only calculate like the third integral, which would be a kind of a fourth dimensional thing. You know, like a heat signature or a flow over an object. But then what's the fifth integral? I mean, the fourth integral. Really, it's going to be some fifth thing. I think it's time, bros. You know what I mean? And I think the math is the code to this simulation. It's literally the code.
Well, it's funny you say this because I actually talked to a very, very, very smart theoretical physicist. I had him on my podcast a while ago. And he taught we had a whole conversation and dialogue about the whole dimensions and how the fourth dimension is not where you're not able to access it. Like for those of you who don't know, basically we live in a three-dimensional world, but we can only see 2 dimensions. And the fourth dimension, as most physicists declare it, they see it as time. And we are not able to analyze or even really conceptualize the fourth dimension because of our lack of technology and the math not quite being there. But the math is there to suggest, as Einstein pointed out, Einstein theorized 11 to 12 different dimensions that he could get up to. So the possibility for higher dimensions and for beings and for sure energy to exist on these higher planes of dimensions is definitely possible. But his theory was he's not entirely sure what that would look like, and he's not entirely sure that we'll ever sort of get an answer anytime soon.
Well, here's
so I kind of agree.
I hope to get to study with these people one day because I'm the math number cruncher guy. I don't know physics too well. I mean, enough to be dangerous with electrical engineering and like blowing myself up. But other than that, you know what I mean? Like, you want like a trajectory and some Newtonian stuff. It's like it's kind of difficult for me. I like never really did that very well. So I'm not your guy to talk on the.
My dad's a physicist. My dad has a PhD in physics, and when I was 17, When I was 17, he said, you could major in physics. And I said, no, I couldn't.
No.
That's a good way to get your kid.
I tried calculus. I got through calculus like 1 or 2. I did differentiation, integration, did triple integrals. I'm like, I am done with that. I'm sticking with my C++.
Yeah, that was it.
Oh man, see, and I love that stuff. I think it's so cool. I just love it.
I like physics a lot, and I'm actually well versed in a lot of physics. Probably know more about physics as a whole than math. Probably better at it, but I would never want to do it. I would never want to be a physicist. Let's put it that way. I like learning and watching from a sort of from far away and learning on my own time. Because it's just a very difficult job to do. High stress levels. I mean, like one of those things about those NASA guys is they get paid for what they do, dude. They definitely get paid for what they do. Those guys who work on rockets, who work at SpaceX. They do things that are so tedious and so instrumental, and one mistake that wasn't even thought of as a mistake can destroy the whole project. So I really give credit to those physicists and engineers who are doing these very important things and who are building the architecture of our country and who have built up the architecture of our country. It's amazing that some people are just willing to do that, right? They're just willing to go out there and do this job that requires a high degree of a knowledge of math, but also knowledge of how things work. And they'll just build it. Right? You got all these guys look back in time who, they would just build stuff, right? Like Nikola Tesla, so many people who were just inventors. And I really, something about an inventor, something about an engineer, I really just admire those people, man, and the way that they think.
Yeah, because they can think abstractly and they can think different dimensions. But who wants to be an actor? About that, you can be in a new movie.
Justin Trudeau, most beautiful dude. I can't act because I can't be anything other than who I am. So if I were to act, it would just be exactly.
He would
me.
be a great actor.
Be the
AOC.
Yeah, I'm a performer, man. I do music, and actually, so that's one of the culture wars I want to fight here. Is I want to get into the. I got a really lit metal record I'm coming out with that I've got all these different topics I want to hit on, and one of them's the Killdozer, bro. You know what I mean? That's like my favorite track. We got to get talk about Texas and Colorado for roads. You know what I mean? And I just think it'd be hilarious to you just red pill a whole nation of youngsters with some old
red pill.
The tribute, the Heemeyer tribute band.
The Heemeyer, you know what I mean?
All right, let's stay on the soundtrack here.
Yeah, it was funny. It was good talk, though. All right, so as Tim Pool said, and I would mostly agree, the truckers have pretty much won. Tow trucks can't move them. The police can't really do anything. They said, we're not going to give you gas. People came walking with gas. Anything they throw at them, like this, that. I mean, other than going full authoritarian, there's not much they can do. Now, the big question I do have is that what are they? Okay, you can drop mandates, but the government can still be tyrannical and put them back on. So we'll see. But this is good news. All tow truck companies on contract with the city have refused to haul away big rigs that have gridlocked Ottawa's downtown for the second week in a row. Steve Kenkolos, I believe that's how you say it, said the consensus among many of the companies seems to be that they don't want to work because the heavy truck industry is such a large part of their livelihoods, and they don't want to damage that part of their business. He said why this is the most effective protest. Well, you can protest all you want, but if someone has your food, if someone has all the supplies for your business, you have to sit down and say, okay, what do you want? Because it's kind of hard. I assume all the elites still like to eat. So the city has contracts with 10 companies, which are typically used to tow vehicles during the parking ban so city can plow and remove snow. Some of the contracts cover towing services for city vehicles, and others help lost and stolen vehicles for the police. We contacted them all, and every one, they're refusing, all refusing, which is awesome, as of today, to provide heavy tow truck work. And he said on Monday evening, after a briefing to the city council, Pascal Lawyer, CEO of the tow truck companies contracted by the city, said his concern is for the safety of his employees and the future of his business. If we were to start towing trucks away from downtown, he said nobody's going to have my back. And the big rigs are blocking the city streets, and honk honk, which is banned on Facebook, but we'll say it anyway, honk honk, and the night in Ottawa since January 28th protest of the scary beer flu mandates.
The scary beer flu.
For a procedure that the medical establishment wants you to take.
They are making America blush, my friends. That's all I could tell you. I mean, I wish that we had this sort of resilience here in this country, because it makes me actually absolutely sick to see everyone just like, you know what I mean? I gotta like feed my family, but if I said no, then you know what I mean? It's like, well, yeah, but if a million of you say no, then they ain't gonna fire you. You know what I mean?
Here's the big thing I would say. In America, at least the Supreme Court was like, they gave somewhat of a reasonable. I'm not a fan of the Supreme Court, by the way. I'm an ANCAP. But okay, fine. It was an okay, because like it didn't figure like or factor in healthcare stuff. But at least the Supreme Court kind of came up with something reasonable. And then UK dropped.
The government, though, right? Remember, there was like a double-edged sword in it, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's not perfect. Now, there's a trucker protest I hear going from California all the way to Washington, and that will be cool to see. So it seems like they are doing it. My big question here is two things. One, our government's going to kind of, like me and Daniel talked about this concept in psychology, and we suggested even Boris Johnson is doing it, where you say, okay, fine. You guys keep pushing hard, really hard.
It's called the pro. Oh, wait, never mind. You're talking about something different. But I want to lay another theory on you that I talked about with who did I talk? I talked about it with someone else I did a podcast with. But go ahead, continue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just saying, hey, you start, someone takes your freedom away, so your freedom to do something. And we see this. And then people are like, oh, man, well, what do I have to do to get it back? So you have to do these conditions, and people say no, and they push back. So the government's like, okay, we get it. Here's your freedom back. No problem. And then after a while, they're like, hey, since you kind of got used to your freedom, conditioned it, we're going to put a little bit more restrictions on, a little bit more. So my big thing is with these trucker protests, can they actually get rid of the existing power structure, or at least make it so that they don't keep, playing tug and pull with tyranny? That being said, I'm also curious to see what the long-term effects will be of people who keep trying to do all these tyrannical measures and then coming back and then saying, I won't do it. And then coming back, will people eventually keep putting up with that? Or will they say, hey, I found a Murray Rothbard book. I listened to Will Smith and Joe Rogan, and maybe, just maybe, I'm not saying it has to go full ANCAP, but can we decentralize something? Can this province leave? Can this state leave? Can this island leave? Can UK, Scotland, Ireland, get rid of the UK? And those are my questions. Not to say I don't agree with what they're doing. I think it's amazing. I just want to see. My biggest question is always, you can say Bill Gates and Biden and even Trump and all these guys are bad. The bigger question is, what do you want to replace it with and how it would work? And that's kind of what I'm focused on. So yeah, sorry, I talked too long.
Well, what I called that was mass cognitive conditioning, similar to, I think, what's been going around recently. What was it called? Mass formation psychosis. Similar, but definitely different. In cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which then out of that derived DBT, which is a more socialized version of cognitive behavioral training, where CBT is more individual, one-on-one with counselor. DBT was made for people who have problems with socializing in a group setting, to help people develop behavioral skills that keep up with their problems that they have socializing, and maybe if they're irrational, and maybe if they're impulsive, things like that. But one of the key points about CBD is retraining good behavior and getting rid of old behavior. And there's an actual neurological aspect to this, which is the reward pathway in the brain, which is the VTA, ventral tegmental area in the brain, is constantly releasing a neurotransmitter called dopamine. I'm sure everyone has heard it, and it's sending it to the nucleus accumbens, the hippocampus, the frontal lobe, and to those areas. And this thing's constantly going off. And depending on your external stimulation, depending on your external conditions, the certain things like drugs, alcohol, even sex can trigger this reward pathway to go off and release massive amounts of dopamine. So one of the ways that CBT counselors use this neural pathway and use it to help form positive patterns of behavior is by conditioning them to do something over and over again through reinforcement. So reinforcement is the outside external continuation repetitiveness of an action with reward. So you do something physically in real life, you do an action, you actually do it, and outside in real life you get an actual reward. And because of that action and completing it, and you get a legitimate reward, your brain then says, okay, I did this, I got a reward. And maybe there's some stimulation involved. Maybe you go for a run, you do something to stimulate your brain, maybe a drink, something like that, whatever it is. You then have that in your brain, sort of memory hold in your frontal cortex and in your hippocampus, that, oh, I got rewarded when I did this, let me continue to do this. And once you do that enough times, you form a habit. And it doesn't take that long to form one of these habits. So what people are doing is, it's a classic technique used by behavioral psychologists, which is why not only governments but corporations, CNN, big cigarette companies, tobacco companies, you name it, a company that sells a product, they hire and spend millions of dollars in for psychologists to help them with advertising. And behavioral psychologists, more specifically. And these individuals know that the incrementalism technique, which is derived out of not only CBT, but really, really old psychoanalytical psychology, which is when you push, so most likely people are going to give a pushback. And every time you push, you take away. And then the next time you push just a little more. Oh, and then you take away. And you do this push and pull enough times where the individual gives up enough room, gives up an inch every push. By the time a year, 2 years go back, there are no more rights. You've given them all up incrementally. This is what Nazi Germany did. This is what the Soviet Union did. They were more radical in their revolution, but definitely Nazi Germany in a lot of societies. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens by little pushes. And no, we don't like this. We're going to disobey. But then there's a compromise met without people knowing, and then you give a little inch, and then you give a little inch, and then they push, and you give a little more inch until you have Australia, till you have Europe, a large portion of Europe right now. But they know this, and it's not, I'm not saying every politician knows it, but they definitely are aware of this behavioral technique, and they are definitely and have been using it throughout this pandemic, because it's so clear to me when they say, oh, we're going to release, it's Freedom Day, right? It's Freedom Day in Great Britain or UK, and you can go out and do a thing, and everyone gets all excited, and oh, finally we get to go out. We can actually, we get a reward. We got rewarded for one bad behavior, but they think it's good behavior. We've done it. We've put in the work. We can get rewarded by Freedom Day. And then as soon as they think they have a reward, as soon as they think the restrictions are off, boom, you put them right back on. So that is a technique that they do use.
And I'm wondering.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, dude, I love what you're saying there. That's I've heard this before, and I think that even like teenagers get this, because the best thing you do is, if you want $50 from your dad, you ask him for 500, man.
Yeah. My dad is now gonna give me that, but yeah,
my dad wouldn't give me anything.
You know what I mean? No?
That didn't work.
Same concept. You know what I'm saying? You're still surrendering. You know,
yeah.
It only works with dads, not with moms. Just FYI.
Oh no.
My kids know where to go when they want $500 or $50.
Yeah.
Coinbase.com.
Yeah, right. It's just not to me. All it is, it's not to their mother. They know that's not.
Yeah.
Nice. Very interesting. So we'll have to see. I'm curious if there'll be push and pull in this. That's my big question. And if Trudeau's like, fine, have your rights back. Okay, it's been a whole 3 months. Okay, how about a little bit of this? How about just these mandates for this? How about a little more? How about a little? Because that's to me how they do it incrementally. They don't just slap a ton on, right? Because people would notice. So hopefully these truckers can actually get rid of most of the existing power structure. Also with that, I want to actually say, hey, I like what this guy said. I don't agree with his politics. I like when, even if somebody is doing something evil or somebody has a terrible idea, at least Bernie Sanders and AOC are like, hey, we believe in these policies that don't work. But they say they believe in them. That's what they believe. I believe they believe that. I don't like these people Scott, I think you can these rhinos who are like, oh, I'm for free market capitalism. How about this bill? How about this socialist bill? How about this? Oh, I'm for the Second Amendment. Oh, how about we little bit of, oh wait, this gun law, yeah, okay, we could do that, little red flag law. Like, that's my problem. It's like, dude,
yeah, me too.
If you're gonna be evil, be honest.
Just be evil about it already. You know what I mean?
I'll take an honest evil guy any day over a guy who's trying to virtue signal, go on Twitter, be like, oh, Americans will never be Australia. Bruh, you voted for a database, track days. So, fine, I'll give this guy some credit. Liberal MP, Joel Lightbound, I don't know if I'm saying that right, says his own party's policy stigmatizes and divides people. And I'm pretty sure Trudeau is part of the Liberal thing. I'm not as good as Canadian politics. I think they have the Liberals, which are like
they
our
have the Liberals and the DMP, the Democratic, the NDP, the New Democratic Party, and then they have the Conservatives. Yeah, so those are the three main ones.
Yeah, then aside they have Green and the PPC with Maxime.
Yeah, the People's Party.
And I'd say the PPC is closest to the Libertarian Party. Maxime Bernier did a thing with Peterson. If you have time,
I like that guy a lot.
I'm a big fan.
Me too. So what did this guy say, though? This is cool. Liberal Quebec MP says he's uncomfortable with the Fed's decision handling of the scary beer food crisis, says its response has become politicized and divisive. Pointing to more than a dozen developed countries that have started to do away with restrictions, Lightbound said Tuesday it's reasonable to think Canada's approach as it becomes increasingly clear that the world will be dealing with this virus for years to come. I can't help but notice, with regret, that both the tone and policies of my government have changed drastically since the last election campaign. One for more of a positive approach than one that stigmatizes and divides people. He also said the Liberal government's decision to put this procedure that the establishment wants you to take at the center political database is undermining public trust in the country's public health institutions. It's becoming harder and harder to know when public health stops and where politics begins. I couldn't have said that better myself. It's time to stop dividing Canadians and pitting one part of the population against another. Couldn't have said it better myself, actually. And even though he's criticizing the approach, he has no desire to leave the caucus, which that actually seems like most politicians. Oh, we're doing bad stuff, but I don't want to leave. It's my team. I'm sure he still say, hey, it's my team. I got to be on my team. And he also said on Tuesday, Trudeau said he understands there's a lot of frustration. We're all frustrated. We're all tired of restrictions and mandates. It's been 2 years. And it's really, really time for us. He said that his government will stay the course. I don't know what he's thinking. His rationalization is mandates are a way to avoid further restrictions. The government has been focused on following the best science from probably Kilgate.
And what's so funny when he said that, the first thing that occurred to me was, if you look in a dictionary, restrictions and those two words are almost synonyms.
Yes.
Like more restrictions is how we're going to get rid of the restrictions.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's some sort of logical fallacy. I'm not sure which one, but I don't think it's quite right.
Yeah. It's like all these politicians, like I remember in the Iraq days, they're like, we need peace in the Middle East. I'm like, okay, what's your plan?
Yeah.
We invade Iraq. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's the opposite of what you want. Like, oh, if we fight them over there, we won't have to fight them here. I'm like, what?
We need a lot of bombs to achieve peace. You have to bomb your way to peace.
Yeah. That's the same thing to me here. I'll mandate my way to defeat restrictions.
Yep.
It's just kind of funny to see his response. Also, what is the best science? Science is a method. It's not but anyway, that's public health advice. You hang out with Bill Gates, bro, to keep people safe. Quite frankly,
and a few other people like the Queen.
The thing that I don't like is he says it's worked. He believes it worked. I don't know what he's looking at.
What worked?
He doesn't believe that.
I don't see anything.
Yeah, I don't think he is. Trudeau may be a goofball, but I don't think he's that stupid.
It's a 1984 thing. He's just looking at people. It's working, and they nod their heads and say it's working.
Yeah,
it's working. I have COVID. Yeah. It's working. I have COVID again.
Yeah,
but
it's working.
But yeah, so one of the things that I talked about, this sort of ties into this. There's two things. One of the first things I talked about is something that I came up with called the protata. So the protata is a Latin word. And the protata is the complete opposite of what would be a populist in American language, which means for the people, by the people, in the most basic sense, where a protata is imitating that which is the populist to gain power and control and to become an authority position. So you play the populist, right? You take advantage of a government that's weak, and you take advantage of people and citizens who are desperate to vote for anyone, aside from the people that they've already been voting for, who are doing damages to their communities, and they'll vote for literally anything. So then you have this protata who comes in, who says they're for the people, who says that they want to make things right, who says they're going to fix all these problems, and they say everything that those individuals want to hear, and they say exactly what it is they're looking for, because the protata is looking at what they're looking for. They're watching what the people are saying, but they're not actually trying to act on behalf of the will of the people. They simply want to manipulate the people and use them to gain control in a government or a structure or a hierarchy, to get to the top of that hierarchy and then extract from it from the bottom up. And with these sort of politicians, like you said this in the beginning, Kareem, it's like people want to destroy the system, like the Antifa types and the BLM and the burn it all down types. But what the hell are they going to replace it with? And here's the problem with both sides, right? The right's less revolutionary, I'll say that much. The left's more burn it down. But both have a fundamental problem, is that the right wants to get rid of left-wing politicians and wants to get rid of a lot of these institutions. It wants to get rid of a lot of things, while the left sort of is more parasitic and self-destructing, just destroy it all down. And there's no real agreement as to like what's going to replace the system that's falling, which is already falling, I think. And we're already seeing these politicians who are coming out. In 2016, that's when it started. Bernie and Trump, these are two extremely populist candidates, whether they were the protata or the actual populist. The period is coming for a leader, and I think I've seen a few, one in particular, a leader who is can not only say the right things, does all the right actions, and seems as though he is the populist, seems as though he is acting on behalf of the people, but in reality, he's acting on his own will and on his own accord, and is simply using the people to get to power. And because of the desperate people being so desperate, that they will elect him. And I have come out before and I have supported Ron DeSantis, right? Me and you have talked about him and some of his policies that I thought were positive. Me and you have talked about some of the things that we thought were really good, with the getting rid of the restrictions and the letting people be free, letting people, whether you want to wear a mask or not, do whatever you want. But I have come to the full realization that he is a bad actor, and he is way more ideologically driven than most people know. And I found this out because I watched a series of podcasts. I watched a Joe Rogan episode where he had a guy on who I've been watching for years now. I've interviewed actually one of the people who got up, but he works for the Innocent Projects, getting wrongly convicted people out of prison, right? His name's Josh Dubin. And I talked to one of the guys who was wrongfully convicted of rape and murder, spent 16 years in jail. You talked to him, I believe, too, Kareem. And I talked to this guy who worked with this guy. And Josh is working in Florida right now to get a man off of who's known. Everyone knows he's wrongfully convicted. The DNA evidence completely goes against this guy's conviction. There's multiple people. And there's multiple cases, some on death row, that will die in prison, and they've been wrongfully convicted. And the governor, literally, I'm not kidding you here, has the magic wand. He can immediately get these people off death row by one signature, right? Ron DeSantis has this ability to say, no, you were wrongfully convicted. The state messed up. Let's get you off. And Josh Dubin came out, and other people around the Innocence Project circle, and are releasing information about Ron DeSantis and how they would meet with Ron DeSantis. And Ron was like yelling at them to take their mask off. Why are you wearing a mask? Right. And Josh is like, I'm trying to get this guy off. And Like you really start to see what this guy is kind of behind closed doors versus what he really is, and how it was all about politics. It was all about making himself look good. It was all about, how is this going to help my image? And I can't. And he said, this is what Ron DeSantis said. He said, how do you expect me to let him off? I just can't let him go. I can't let him off. And Josh Stubman goes, he's innocent. And Ron DeSantis responds back, well, I can't let you. What do you expect me to let him go? And again, this is one example, which I think there'll be many others. Of someone who is listen. Anyone who locks people up when there is sufficient evidence to even come in conflict, to even prove reasonable doubt. Right? We don't have to prove perfect innocent in our country. That is not the standard by which we imprison people, set people free. It's reasonable doubt. Any sort of evidence that shows there's a reasonable doubt, you are not guilty, right? And there's more than that. There's DNA evidence in the Clemente case and a plethora of other cases. And in this case in Florida, you have one of the oldest men on death row in his 60s right now, who will die on death row, most likely. And there is literally no evidence to put him there. It is literally prosecutors with this winning mentality. Prosecutor after prosecutor, they're like, oh, I want to win. I want to get a high conviction rate. And no one wants to admit that the fucking state fucked up. And you have Ron DeSantis at the top of all this, who he has like control, broad discretionary power to literally sign off and pardon him and get him off. And he won't do it. He won't do it. So after seeing that, after seeing his actions, I take all, like, I do not support the guy. I'm not saying he's an evil man. I'm not saying he's like a villain or anything like that. But I really just, that is like one of those things with me. I spent a lot of time in juvie when I was younger. That's one of those things that is an absolute, I take my support from you. Like, there is no, same thing with Kamala Harris. She did the same exact thing as Ron DeSantis, and multiple people have. I just lost all respect for the man. And I just wanted to say that on public, on record, to get that out there. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah.
That is incomprehensible to me. And I know that politicians do it all the time, but I can't. I mean, it's cliche, but how do you sleep at night? Really, how do you sleep at night?
I think they're
I can't fathom that mentality.
Yeah.
I honestly think they are saying, hey, I did it for a lot of politicians. If you listen, they're like, I'm doing it for the greater good. I just had to do it. We had to, for what they'll come up with any rationalization, even if it's the craziest thing. Like, you heard Donald Rumsfeld, they're like, where are the weapons of mass destruction? It's like, they're in the east, south, northwest, everything on the compass. Like, dude, where are they? You lied. Hey, you lied. I didn't lie. Like, okay, you're in the pocket of Halliburton in the military-industrial complex. Like, just come out with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your effect, I didn't know that about Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, and I would suggest everyone who wants to learn more, watch the Josh Dubin episode on Joe Rogan. He went on Joe Rogan, I think it was like 2 episodes ago. Watch the episode. He talks about it in more depth, and multiple people have talked about it. Watch the episode, because it is kind of hurting. It hurts you to hear this stuff. Every time that guy comes on, I get close to crying. Every time him and the other people from the Innocent Project come on, it's so emotional, I almost can't watch it, because all you hear is how these prosecutors and district attorneys they're just so despicable. They're so worried about winning cases and their conviction rates that they will be brought up with evidence, biological DNA evidence that proves that someone's innocent, and they always make excuses. They say their hands are tied, and they know, and in all these cases, they know that they were wrongfully accused. And in all these cases, they're almost all black men on top of that. And I'm not saying that necessarily means it was race related, but yes, all these people were black men. All of them were brought about and imprisoned on just terrible evidence to begin with. And when given the chance to make things right, they never do. They prolong it until enough pressure. And thank God we have people like Joe Rogan's podcast, because after this guy went on Rogan's show, guess what? He actually was able to get 2 people off death row. He was able to save somebody's life because of the Joe Rogan's podcast, its influence, and how the prosecutor felt the heat and even admitted to Josh Stubman. He made a joke saying about how the area in, I think it was Alabama, was the armpit, meaning like you don't get out of it once you go in there in her courtroom. And in private, this prosecutor said to him, "Oh, it's like the armpit," telling him that she watched the Joe Rogan episode, so that she watched it and she knew, like, so all this influence from the Rogan podcast literally was able to put pressure on people to add. It definitely had something to do with him getting these people off. So again, it's hard, man. It's really a hard thing to think
on
about.
that. Also, thanks for bringing that up. That was really good. And even today, you're watching Dave Smith, who I will put an endorsement behind. I do feel comfortable doing that for the Libertarian Party forerunner, because he's the one guy, and he brought this up on Rogan as well. It's great that Rogan brought to light that thing to help people on death row. Also with, the different doctors, Dr. Malone, and Dr. Peter McCulloch. But even more important, he brought up Yemen today, and he talked about, hey, here's what's going on. He gave the technical history pretty well without getting into like a really complicated thing and explain what's going on. It's a big issue. I think it's probably one of the biggest issues if you take away what's going on right now with the truckers and all that. And I would say, hey, foreign policy, everybody's focused on Ukraine, but I think Yemen is also something that needs to be discussed. And because Joe Rogan brought that up, there's comments now saying, I didn't know about that. Let me look into that. So if people keep bringing it up, Rogan could stop potentially, hundreds of thousands of people from dying of, treatable diseases and other problems like starvation.
He's literally doing the Lord's work when I say this. Like, I don't, whether you believe in God, I get it. We all have our disagreements philosophically, theologically, I get it. But whether it's the Lord in the universe sense, in the fact that energy can neither be destroyed nor created in the literal, the third rule of, thermodynamics, or whether you believe in God, the Christian God, the Muslim God, he is doing the Lord's work in the sense that he's really bringing light to all of these dark areas that are being covered up by the mainstream media, that have been completely abandoned by both parties. And he is helping all causes on each side of the aisle, because this is a more left-wing cause when we're talking about these sort of black criminals, not criminals, these black people who get charged as criminals and get wrongfully convicted, and they sort of get like forgot about in the system. So he's bringing on these sort of left-wing guys who are sort of speaking out against the right-wing guys. And the one thing I say about all this stuff, a lot of this stuff, is like, when you hear these cases, a lot of these cases go back to having to do with something with drugs, with crack, with this and that. And it's really sad. And I say this all the time, like, a lot of these cases, for instance, I'm going to make a statement here. This is not like I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm sure you guys heard about a little bit about the Amir Locke case, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
The case. Okay. So we don't have to get into the details, but there was a no-knock warrant that was, done in this case. And the kid, young kid was shot. No-knock warrants were brought about in the mid-'80s under Nancy Reagan's policy on drugs. So there was a war on drugs in the 80s, and Nancy Reagan, along with a lot of other people within the Reagan administration, made a clear, distinct separation between powdered cocaine and crack cocaine, which increased prison rates like crazy. And then they also said, because of drugs and because of the fact that we might need to go in there and that they might shoot us, and they made up a lot of this stuff. I'm not saying they lied, but they used all the pretexts they could. They used all the excuses. Well, they could have drugs and we need to get it before they dump the evidence. That was the idea behind this whole no-knock warrant, is if they're dumping evidence, we need to get there early, and they could shoot us. So then you have no-knock warrants in the 80s, and they have been so damaging to these minority communities and to really anyone. And it was brought about by the right. This was a thing that was brought about by the war on drugs, which was almost entirely brought about by the right. And they're responsible for not only the war on drugs, but on these no-knock warrants and on these policies that are still hurting these communities. And it's just sad to say, but I really like to see people on the right admit this stuff. Stop defending Reagan. Stop pretending like I hear people like Ben Shapiro always talking about George Bush and Reagan. Like, it's like,
I don't know what you mean, man. I don't know
like
what you mean.
one, like, you can't just take an aggregate of a few statistics and make that the whole judgment of these administrations, because there were so many other things going on, and they always try and defend these people. He tries to defend George Bush and say, well, well, actually, Bush was actually good. If it wasn't for like his policy, he would be known. I was like, no, Ben.
It wasn't that he was so bad.
like
You know what I mean? And as in the
yeah.
name George Bush, he's actually good.
And I like Ben. Like, I really like him. I think he's a good guy.
I do too. I probably like the guy, but
this stuff I just think needs to be talked about. And you know, it's tough stuff. Admitting that that someone on your team fucked up, that someone on your tribe that you like. Because let's get it, Reagan was great for as far as foreign policy goes. I mean, he did wonders with Russia, Soviet Union at the time. They called him the great communicator for a reason. That wasn't a made up thing. He did do a lot of good things on that front. But the point is it's really easy to sort of make excuses for someone that's on your tribe. But in the long run, it will be better to just admit it all, get it all out, get the truth out, even if it hurts, even if it sucks, and then move on. Because when you start covering up and you start making excuses, then more people that want to come out for that party, for the right, are going to realize they can get away with certain stuff because people in their party will make excuses for them and will justify things. And the best way to make politicians are accountable is don't let them get away with anything.
I don't know where it came from, where we started making these politicians gods. It's like, maybe that comes with FDR, or maybe it's before that with Lincoln, or I don't know where. But it's like, for some reason, in the modern era, it's really annoying because it's like you got people that just lionize Reagan, people that lionize Clinton,
yeah, it is
people
true.
that lionize.
I agree with you.
I don't understand people that think Trump's a god. It's like, why, man? These are people.
Well, I mean, he does sort of look like a god.
You know what I mean? And they do good and bad. And if we could stop excusing all the bad,
I get what you're saying.
Did 5 things that are good.
It is. Well, it goes back to what Kareem said, right? People think things are bad or good or evil, good or bad, when there's so much stuff in the middle between absolutely good, which we could say is the ultimate ethic, which is Jesus Christ, that's the ultimate good, and the ultimate bad, which is the serpent in the Garden of Eden, which is like the ultimate evil, deception, manipulation. Yep. And bad. But in between there's all this stuff, which is like, some people fucking lie. Some people make honest mistakes and cover it up. Some people do things and they don't mean to do it, and then they don't want to admit it. Like, there's all this in between stuff that somehow just gets missed. And it's like, I'm working on a book now, and I probably shouldn't even be starting it. But today I had this idea about a book, which basically, I haven't come up with a for sure title, but I thought of the abolition of the middle, the moderate. There is no moderate in America. Something along those lines. I came up with a few names. I want to talk about how there is no in between in the political sphere right now. There is no in the middle. There is no moderate. There is no in between. I
keep losing friends, man.
There is none.
I've got no friends anymore.
There is none. Because if you don't agree, if you don't align with the left completely, you are right wing. Yeah. That's point blank, period.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. That's all it is. And Joe Rogan is not right wing. And anyone who says he's right wing is fucking crazy. He's supported Bernie Sanders.
They never listened is why.
Did you see the list? Did you see the list that came out?
Oh, yeah.
Dude,
Russell
Sam
Brand,
Harris.
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand. These guys, Sam Harris is not right wing, dude. Sam Harris is the left.
Russell Brand came out.
Right. He voted for Biden.
Yeah. And Russell Brand came out and did a funny kind of rebuttal video to it yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I watched that. It was hilarious.
He always nails it. He did great. He listed all of these policies. He listed all of these things that I completely disagree with. I love the guy, but I'm like, yeah, you're a leftist. You're a great leftist, but yeah, he knows he's a leftist.
Yeah. The second he says you should pay your taxes, I'm out. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you mean there. I don't want to do that anymore, guys. I'm leaving.
I have the same thing. Yeah.
Stop making excuses for Joe Rogan's real right wingism. Like, he's really stop trying to play that I remember someone said that stop trying to use the fig tree that he had Bernie on. Right. Like, it's like, what?
Dude, come on. He endorsed Bernie. And what's funny is, I like to listen to Jimmy Dore on foreign policy, but once it gets to hey, healthcare, I'm like, boop, bye.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah, I get it.
And speaking of foreign policy, I do want to talk about this, just kind of shed light. So we all know Russia and Ukraine keep going back and forth. NATO's a problem. We're the only ones saying, hey, it's bad. The left and the right are like, no, they're a peacekeeping thing. I'm like, okay, have you seen Libya lately? Maybe Google that with Yemen. When you're done doing all your goofy stuff. But Ukraine has accused Russia of blocking its access to the sea as Russia is preparing for naval exercises next week amid sprawling tensions in the region. Ukrainian foreign minister, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name, said the Sea of Azov was completely blocked and the Black Sea is almost fully cut off by Russian forces. Russia has repeatedly denied any plans to invade Ukraine, despite massing more than 100,000 troops at the border, but just begun massive military drills with neighboring Belarus, and Belarus is a close ally of Russia and has a long border with Ukraine. France called the drills, believed to be Russia's biggest deployment to Belarus since the Cold War, a violent gesture. Well, okay. Hey, Macron, maybe you could try and stop pissing your own people off?
Yeah.
But Ukraine says they amount to psychological pressure. Same thing, elbow macaroni. So the U.S. on Thursday urged Americans in Ukraine to leave immediately due to increased threats, Russian military action. Those in Ukraine should depart now via commercial or private means, the State Department said in an advisory. And then the foreign minister also said the unprecedented vast area where the maneuvers will be conducted makes navigation in both seas practically impossible. We'll have to see what happens. This is actually a nice map I found showing where they're positioned, so you can see the newly arrived units, Russian units in Belarus exercises, and permanently stationed units, where they're all at. As far as I'm concerned, we're NATO.
It's the fucking Russians, man. They're getting your shit.
They're taking us down.
Don't talk about them.
Yeah, no.
Abort.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite left-wing critique. It's like we can't beat you in an argument. You're Russian. Like it's the most like
Vladimir.
You're a Russian asset. Like that's what Hillary Clinton tried to call Tulsi Gabbard in the primaries, and they also Cenk Uygur, which I don't despise a lot of people, but I really despise him.
Come on,
I despise him. He called Jimmy Dore, Aaron Maté, and what's his name there from the Gray Zone? I can't think of it off the top of my head. Great guy. But anyways. And Greenwald, he said that they're Russian agents, and that him and Annika Spearing, which I also despise, who got destroyed by Ben Shapiro in a debate, like absolutely abolished. Like it was not even. And I listen, like it wasn't because it's not because the left doesn't have any winning points. It's that she can't articulate things, and it's like this is the debate. So what do you guys think about critical race theory? I'm paraphrasing. And Ben Shapiro goes on his, and you know how he is really quick and witty on his feet. She's like, well, it doesn't exist. There's no proof it exists. And then Ben gives all the examples, and it's like, that's like, you can't, just so terrible. Like,
she's never heard of critical theory before.
I know.
Then,
it's like, well, this is what she said. She said, I thought that was just something in university. And it's like, well, that's because you haven't actually looked at the issue. You've just been repeating left-wing talking points.
Exactly. And that's the problem I have with this Russia thing is that we keep us, France and the UK and all these NATO people keep urging like, oh, okay, well, I think the reason they're doing this, if I had to guess, is because they said, hey, Ukraine can join NATO. Putin doesn't want that to happen. So because he feels Ukrainians are probably close to people, Ukraine are closer to Russians. So he probably did amass that. I don't know what his plans are, but to me, he might try it. China tries Taiwan, puts us in a bind. We should get out of NATO. This is not our problem. And France and UK, I would say the same thing. Why do France and UK care? How about this? Macron, why don't you get your people not to dislike you as a starting point before you go criticize external affairs? Like Peterson says, clean your own house before you go try and fix the world. I believe that's his quote. So
clean your room.
That's what I do.
He actually got that quote from a Navy SEAL, but yes, he does say.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. Make your bed, right?
Is it McGregor?
I can't remember the name of the Navy SEAL, but look it up. He got that from a Navy SEAL's book. And the quote is like, before you try and change the world, you want to make your bed first, something along those lines. But yes, Jordan says the quote all the time.
Well, I think I came up with it first. I've been saying clean your room long before any of these people. And
I think
I'd like a little
moms came
credit.
up with it in general. Moms in general.
I was going to say, we need the credit for anybody telling you to clean your room.
I will give you
that
the
is
credit.
True.
I will give the credit to Aubrey and my mother as well. You know what I mean?
You.
Just very much so. She told me it was important, and I never listened.
Yeah. Well, I can see behind you. It looks very clean.
I know.
It's not very clean, guys. You shouldn't listen to anything here.
Dude, Jordan Peterson would be shaking in his grave right now. He's not dead, but like he would die after seeing that and then shaking his grave.
It's all right. You know, it's just my garage. We're doing painting here, and I'm the creative mind, and I work in the chaos. You know what I mean? I'm pushing the boundaries like that all the time. So as long as I know where it is, you know, that's the thing about guys. We'll be like, oh, you know where that screw is? It's by the left side of the drawer into the bathroom in the third hall.
I know those guys too.
I'm like that. So, you know.
Nice.
So what are your guys' thoughts on this whole Ukraine thing? I really do want to hear some feedback. I maybe get some critique on my positions, but what do you guys think about it? Do you think that it's a lot of propaganda from the State Department and from the media? Do you think that Russia might invade? Like, what are your guys' thoughts on this?
Propaganda.
Yeah.
Just because this kind of thing is going on all over the world 24/7, 365 days a year. Yeah. And if we're focusing on Ukraine and Russia, I mean, there's a reason, and it's not because this is a unique situation. It's not a unique situation. It's because it affects us. And yes, there are ties that we have there but I mean, the fact that they're making a big deal out of it it doesn't mean that it's a bigger deal than the 50 other conflicts going on in the world. It means
agree.
it.
I think we've wanted a war with Russia since 2016 for some damn reason, and I can't figure it out, really. I mean, like, why else would we declare that it was stolen by the Russians and that Trump was a Russian agent and all this stuff? I just don't really understand, you know?
Our freedoms must be there. We're always, like, fighting for our freedoms because they get...
I don't know.
It must be in Ukraine right now.
Yeah. I mean, Hill Dog really doesn't like Putin for some reason, and I think there's some beef there, which it just seems like this goes back quite a ways, and I don't really know other than why we'd be doing this for. I mean, it just seems like propaganda, like you're saying. Like it seems like there's some other thing going on that I'm not. I don't know what.
I don't know, but something.
Yeah, there's something there.
There is. We'll have to see actually what happens, though. I'm interested to see if it could be just they're trying to improve their stocks in Raytheon, and that's why they do the Russia.
Well, I think it's something similar to that. So
it's financial. I'm sure it's financial.
Yes. So I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty about this, but Matt Taibbi is a reporter who has covered this like in depth, way more than I have, and I read his reports on Substack. Greenwald also talked about it. Glenn Greenwald, who worked with Snowden. I'm sure you guys have heard of him. But so basically, there's this pipeline, right, that goes from Ukraine through all the way through Europe. It's called the Qatar-Turkey pipeline, right? And Russia, as we speak right now, today, at this very moment, has a monopoly on gas, right? But it's not like quite a full monopoly because you have this literally massive pipeline that is one of the largest pipelines in the East that goes through the EU down to Ukraine, and Russia doesn't have control of that yet. So Russia and its Gazprom monopoly wants control of this pipeline. But simultaneously, while Russia wants to expand their monopoly on gas in the region, the United States wants this line to stay in Ukraine because as long as it stays in Ukraine and Russia doesn't have it, they're able to get the gas through to the European Union and get it cheap for the United States. So it would be a Western asset for this pipeline to stay in Ukraine's hands because then they're able to get gas. If Russia takes it, again, they're not in the NATO, and they're not going to be too friendly when it comes to sharing gas, as they already are not. Massive gas spikes right now in Russia, for those of you who don't know. Energy prices are skyrocketing in Russia and in Ukraine, both areas. So then you have this board, right, the Burisma board, where you have a an ex-CIA director, and of course, none other than Biden's son on there. With very, very little experience when it comes to energy. And he's on this board. And then a external prosecutor, a newer one, says, I want to investigate this. Something weird's going on with Ukraine and the gas monopoly, the pipeline, the Burisma board. And this happens. He says this publicly. And then Biden also says publicly, I told the man, that son of a bitch, if he wants the $1 billion, fire the prosecutor. He says this all on record. And then they actually fire this guy. They legitimately fire this guy. And then nothing's heard, not a peep. And then 2019, there's the whole Russia thing with President Trump, who was supposedly calling up the president of Ukraine asking for dirt on, Joe Biden. But really the call was literally like, hey, I heard about this in Burisma. What's going on? And then Democrats just lost their mind, which tells me that it was weird because they tried to say that he was doing quid pro quo when it was like completely reversed, which is the weirdest thing we've been seeing. It was like they were actually the ones who were doing what they accused Trump of doing. So I'm not saying I'm not making a statement of fact here and saying that's why they're doing Russia. That's why they want a war, because I think there's other reasons. But I think this gas line and this financial interest they have in this gas line, and I think the fact that Russia is trying to expand. I'm not saying it wants Ukraine, but again, Russia has been in our news nonstop for like how long now, and we've been making them out to be the bad guys. The election stealers, the election interferers, the cyber attackers, and the media has really propped up Russia as the big bad wolf and as the boogeyman. And it just seems like a lot of it's propaganda. So I don't even know what to believe. All I know is there's so many special interests involved in this. There's so many things involved in this whole thing that I definitely wouldn't trust our government to make a move. So I don't know what's going on. But I definitely do think war is a possibility, but it's probably not going to look like what the government's making it look like. Like, if war is to occur, I honestly don't think it is going to happen from Russia invading Ukraine, because it would be the first time in world history that a nation invades another nation that has nuclear arms. Ukraine ranks number 3 in the world for nuclear weapons. So this would be the first time a nation gets invaded that has nuclear arms. And mind you, right, Russia is number 1. They have the most amount of nukes in the world, right? And they're going to invade Ukraine. So when you have both these countries, they both have nukes. This is the first time. The probability of those probably being used is really high. And it's scary to think about. But I do think without a doubt, I will say this if there's any sort of actual conflict to where Russian soldiers even approach Kiev, and I mean approach Kiev, I have no doubt in my mind Ukraine will immediately use a ballistic missile, which is a targeted strategic nuclear weapon, and bomb them. There's no doubt in my mind. As soon as Russia approaches Kiev, there will be nuclear weapons used. There's no doubt about it. So if Russia's really want to do this, I think the threat of nuclear war, not for us, I'm not trying to fearmonger for us, but I think for them, I think it's possible. And I know that sounds like a little dramatic and sort of like, Armageddon, I don't know, but I really just think that, I don't think Ukraine's going to take it sitting down. They're not going to just let Russia come up in their house when they have these weapons they can use. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty stressful thing, talking about all that. So I think we need to unwind, check your UPS, because you're going to get something for free. I'm always excited to get something in the mail. So Sleepy Joe's going to hook you up. $30 million for free pipes. Now I know they said, "Oh, this is fake." Well, he was going to give something else out too. I like all the damage control the liberal media does. They're like, it's not exactly true.
They were also giving out syringes and meth pipes.
This
was the fact check. It's
it's mostly false.
Yeah, it's mostly false. They were giving out syringes with meth pipes, and it wasn't because of equality and equity. It was because people need to do drugs safely. It's like, wait a minute. I get syringes. I actually get that. Syringes make sense to me.
You guys, we're also doing heroin. It's not just crack. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Syringes actually make sense to me, though, why they would give those out. Because, when you shear needles, there's all those diseases. But crack pipes and meth pipes, that's just a little peculiar to me. It does seem a little weird. And, of course, these pieces of glass, somehow, some way, the government's managed to spend $30 million in this program, which really should be the story, right? It shouldn't be the crack pipes. It should be the way that the government, as a criminal organization, funnels money through these things and literally waste taxpayers' dollars, completely waste it. And this is not a $30 million program. I know, because I can probably go online for less than $20,000 and buy thousands of crack pipes. They're literally just glass. literally glass. And if I wanted to hand them out, and if I guarantee if I had 100,000, I could buy enough crack pipes for my whole entire city. I don't know, like, where do you think they get these numbers from? Who does the budgeting on this? Because even drug dealers know. Drug dealers are looking at this shit like, what the hell, man? This shit, like, they're spending $30 million on crack pipe. Like, it's just terrible government spending.
You know what I mean? Fucking hook me up with some weed pipes, dude. How about we just decriminalize weed?
No, meanwhile, people are still getting arrested in certain states for weed.
Yeah, man.
That's fucking hilarious. That's actually, now that I think about it, that's hilarious. Like, in certain states right now, people are still getting charged and getting imprisoned, going to jail for weed, while Biden is literally handing out crack pipes when he can federally legalize it.
I'm just saying. You know?
Do you think if Joe Rogan becomes president, he'll give out free DMT?
I don't know.
God.
Well, I don't know. Well, it already is free. It already is pretty much. It's already in you. So you know, you do have natural DMT that gets produced in the adrenal gland.
Like a Johnny Appleseed plant the bark root all over the place campaign. You know what I mean? Spent $30 million just like Johnny Apple DMT seed. I don't know.
Yeah, this one's hard not to just laugh at, but it's like
I don't have anything really to say like prolific.
Either, man. I only have about like 5 minutes before my battery's going to die too.
Are we going to even try and bother asking whether this is constitutional or not? Like, is this even
why
legal?
Would we?
Does it matter?
Are we going to even like
their ass with the
that's what my brother says,
you know?
right? I tell my brother this story, and he's like, "Is that legal?" And I'm like, "Who the fuck knows? Nothing they're doing is legal anymore." He's like, "Is this legal?" And I'm like, "Dude, they're literally killing Iraqis and cutting their heads off, and then they're saying Russia, Russia, Russia. They don't do anything legal anymore." Like, but it was funny to me because he was like, "Are you sure this is constitutional?" And I'm like, "Tommy, they're not doing anything constitutional anymore."
Yeah, but anyway, flag laws.
Yeah, so somebody made the point that, you know, someone was asking, are you going to have vax cards to go get your crack pipe? And, you know, I think that's a little fair.
The simulation
I want my crack pipe.
I want mine too.
It's for your health, you know what I mean? You got to have your vax card to get your crack pipe.
You need your vaccine to buy these syringes.
Yeah. I put that in my article yesterday. I wrote a satire article about it, and I was saying that, you know, we're a nation of crackheads, but we're also a nation of laws. We have rules.
And we also want it for your health.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Fauci. I wonder if Fauci's getting some of those packs. Maybe that's why he's been off on these. Maybe that's why he's been a little off on these medical quotes, because Biden's giving him the old crack bag with the crack pipe, and he's sitting there and he's like, oh, going back to his AIDS days.
Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, that guy has serious.
Fired. You can donate $5, $10. I'm like, yeah.
He would be the best politician, though. He would be so good at being a politician. Never admit to anything. He would win as a Democrat without a doubt. You put him in California, he'll become governor in no time, because they'll be like, you're responsible for the suppression of all other drugs when it comes to AIDS, because he was. Other drugs were rising, and they actually had medical studies proving that they were more effective with AZT, but because AZT was the funder, because they were making the money, because Fauci and at the time the NIAID was getting the money and they were funding AZT. That was the one that was going to be made. He, along with other people at the NIAID, along with other people, suppressed these other medications for HIV. So this guy's a monster. Like, Fauci's one of those guys who he's done some really bad things. And I mean, forget COVID.
He's doing
call him the Dr. Mengele of America. The Dr. America Mengele, man.
I don't go that far, because that is a little hyperbolic.
He's almost like, well, I don't know. I mean, he's doing human experiments, and he's, you know,
I get it. But Mengele was responsible for upwards of injecting millions of people with things like cyanide and other things. And Mengele, the reason why he was so bad, partly was because it takes a certain type of person for you to look at someone, because at the time, one thing that the German regime did is to create or discuss sensitivity and discuss response in Germans for
I
the
know what you're
Jews
talking about.
was to claim the typhus outbreak, right? So there was this typhus outbreak. So then they rounded up a lot of Jewish people because they made the claims in the news that because the Jewish people were dirty and not cleanly, that the typhus outbreak was coming from their area. Then they take them to get vaccinated with the typhus vaccine, and they give them, I mean, they did so many drugs, so many experiments, most died. Very terrible. But the thing about Mengele is that he died in, I believe, 1974 and never faced a day of jail. Never faced a day of jail for his crimes against humanity. And there was a lot of people out of those
I don't
the
mean to say
Nazis
he's
that
literally
didn't spend
doing
a
those
minute,
things. Yeah,
in jail.
He's literally like that. You're right. It's a hyperbolic. It's a comedic or.
But I get where you're going. I get it. He's doing bad things regardless.
It's so absurd these days. Where I would not be shocked in 50 years he ends up that way. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
You got some guy.
There you go.
Dude, that's hilarious.
You know, the little droplets get all over the place.
How can you be serious with this type of stuff? Like, the Biden administration is.
You just can't.
I don't even know.
They're
if that's real.
so twisted.
I laugh at it all these days, man. That's what I mean. I'm a little. I find it all like stingingly, weirdly. I don't know. You've got to laugh because if you don't, it'll just drive
I agree.
you nuts.
You lose your shit. You do.
It's not funny to a satire writer, though. What are we supposed to do now?
I know, right?
Yeah. I know. They're
job.
taking all the fucking. They're taking all the jokes.
Yeah.
Look at this thing I sent you, Cream. Show it. Pull it up on the screen if you can. This is something I quickly screenshotted on Twitter. That again, this is almost not reality. The simulation is broken again. So I'll let him pull this up. Just pull this picture up, and you can zoom in if you can. So this is right here. It's a post on Twitter that says Sam Brinton, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition in the Office of Nuclear Energy that Joe Biden just hired. And it's literally him in sex outfits with guys with muzzles that look very young. The picture on the left looks like young males who are down with bunny ears, and they have a muzzle on their face and they can't breathe. And then there's guys in leather, and then there's whips involved. But anyways, this guy's leading the Office of Nuclear Energy. This guy. Like, this is not real life. I'm telling you, there's something about this. This is a real thing. Like, these pictures are real, and I don't even know what to say anymore, but, I mean.
Yeah, I just say, hey, the simulation is broken. I think we can end on that note. I mean, like, geez, this is crazy. Definitely, Audrey, I want to give a shout out to your site. What is it?
Oh, fake news your way.
I always love the fake news journalists because, like we said, the simulation is broken. I think that's a good segue to say, hey, look, if the simulation's broken, I don't know what to do. Have fun with it. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? I'm just kind of like people like, doesn't this shock you? I'm like, no, not really.
I mean, it would have to be really, really crazy to shock me.
So we got fake news here, but the good kind, because we always like, satire articles like the Babylon Bee.
Yeah.
And then
did you make this?
Yeah.
I love this. This is actually pretty cool. We got our own Babylon Bee person here. That's really cool because I used to love The Onion, and Babylon Bee is hilarious. So yeah, keep going with this, Aubrey. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
and sharing articles. And if you want to get a cool T-shirt, you can head over to the quantumeffectstore.org.
Get a nice, beautiful cup like mine right there, which is my podcast logo.
Can you get a cup?
Yeah, go all the way down. Go all the way down. I don't have this one up yet, but I do have the ones I have up there are better. If you go down, you can get that one, which is really nice. Made in the United States of America. Very nice mug. Very expensive on my part. I say I'm not making money off a lot of money off all these things because of trying to get them from United States distributors, which in the end cost me a little more, but I'd rather get it from the U.S. than support China. But some things you just cannot get in the U.S. Like, for instance, the reason why I put these ceramics up is because I'm still looking for somewhere I can get it in the United States. This right here, was, you can't see, I ripped a sticker off, but it was made in China. So it's very hard to get these ceramics from the USA, but I'm working on it.
We got some clay. We'll figure it out. We got some Ron Paul t-shirts, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
If you're into all that. We also have some funny Barack Obama ones. I have a drone. Alex Jones, my boy, and the quote from They Live. I find that hilarious. I came here to delete emails and destroy America, and I'm all out of emails. So check it out. You can also find all of his videos here.
This is what I wanted to talk about. That first one, the videos and content. Click on that for a second. So right now, this is going to be like the members area. It's in beta right now. It's just one video up. I have to work on it, but this is going to be where I host videos. It's going to be my hosting section of it, where I'll be able to actually upload from hard drive videos. I don't need any links. And I'll be able to host others' videos, and I do not have to go through a third party. So with my other section with all my videos, some of those are linked to Vimeos, which they're typically not going to take my shit down, but some of them are still YouTube linked. So the goal is eventually to have this be the members area, where I'm going to put all of my footage that we do that we can't talk about on YouTube, because I've been censored 3 times on YouTube. I've gotten 2 suspensions. The next suspension I get on YouTube, I will be banned. So that's why I made this website, and I'm trying to work on it as good as I can. I'm doing a lot of stuff to try and make it better, but this will be the area where I'll have a lot of the content in the future. So yeah, that's it.
All right, and so you can find us on the Essential Libertarians on YouTube, on Twitch, and you can find me on Facebook at Kareem M. Mays. I want to give a big shout out to my co-host, Daniel Vitro, and Aubrey. Thank you for being here. Also to our special guest, Scott Bob Dorr.
Yes.
I love
the hat.
I'm back. My battery died. I didn't plan on it being that long, and my we're out here in the garage doing Bob Dorr stuff. Yeah. You can see my drum set though a little bit, maybe. Yeah. It's a little better. It's still a mess though, guys. Sorry, I don't clean my room. You know what I mean? Don't listen to me.
All right, I won't. Don't listen to this Scott now. I don't know who he is. All right, everyone. The Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. I will see you next time.